Story number 1. In December 2019, a quiet suburban neighborhood in Oklahoma became the setting for a terrifying real-life home alone moment. 12-year-old Chris was home alone. His mother, a nurse, worked the night shift, and he was used to being by himself. It was just a few days before Christmas, and the house was lit with warm holiday lights. Chris wasn't scared, at least, not yet. At 8:30 p.m., while watching TV, Chris heard a noise outside. At first, he thought it was the wind. But then he saw them, two men. Dark hoodies. Standing on the porch, his heart pounded. They tried the door, locked. They whispered to each other, "Are you sure no one's home?" "Yeah, I saw the mom leave earlier." Chris panicked. He grabbed the house phone to call 911, but before he could dial, a loud crash echoed from the back of the house. A window. They were breaking in. Chris ran. He had to hide. He had to think. He remembered home alone. He turned on more lights. He cranked up the TV volume. But it was too late. One of them was already inside. Chris hid in the closet, holding his breath. Footsteps crept upstairs. They were looking for valuables. Or worse. One of them muttered, "Check the kid's room." Chris knew he had no time. He slipped out, moving silently to his mother's room. In the bedside drawer. A gun. His hands shook as he picked it up. Footsteps. Getting closer, the door creaked open. A shadow moved. Chris stepped forward, gun raised, voice trembling but firm, "Get out." "I called the cops." The intruder froze. For a moment, silence. Then, panic. "Let's go." They ran. The sound of their footsteps fading into the night. Seconds later, sirens. Red and blue lights flashing through the windows. The police arrived, but the burglars were already gone. Chris was safe. Shaken, but unharmed. Days later, the criminals were caught using security footage from a neighbor's camera. They had been watching the house for days, looking for the perfect moment to strike. But they didn't expect a 12-year-old boy ready to defend himself. For Chris, Christmas would never feel the same again. But he had learned one thing: in a moment of fear, quick thinking can save your life. Story number 2. 14-year-old Jake was home alone. His parents had gone out for dinner, leaving him with a simple rule: don't open the door for anyone. He wasn't scared. Not at first. The house was quiet, except for the distant rumble of thunder. He sat on the couch, playing games on his phone. When he heard it, a knock at the front door, soft, almost polite. Jake frowned. It was nearly midnight. Who would be knocking at this hour? He ignored it. But then, knock. Knock. Knock, a little louder this time. Slowly, he crept to the peephole. Nobody was there. The porch was empty. Jake's stomach twisted. He backed away from the door, trying to shake the unease crawling up his spine. Maybe it was just the wind, maybe. Then, his phone buzzed, a notification from the security app. Motion detected. Front door. Jake's breath hitched. He looked at the live camera feed. Still nothing. But the app was still alerting him. Motion detected. Motion detected. Suddenly, a loud bang. The back door. Jake spun around, heart racing. The house was silent, but he knew he wasn't alone anymore. Something had come inside. Jake grabbed his phone, his hands shaking. "Mom? Dad?" he whispered. No answer. He tiptoed toward the stairs, trying not to make a sound. Then, footsteps. Not his own. Someone, or something, was moving upstairs. His parents weren't home yet. His sister was at a friend's house. Jake was completely alone, or at least he should have been. Then, from the top of the stairs, a whisper. Jake, his blood turned to ice. He didn't recognize the voice. He turned his phone's flashlight on, and the power cut out. The house plunged into darkness. Jake ran down the hall toward his parents' room. He slammed the door shut, locked it, and pressed his ear against the wood. Silence. Then, scratching, soft, slow. Right outside the door, a cold chill spread through the room. Then Jake reached for the bedside lamp, desperate for light. The bulb flickered. Once. Twice. Then, a face in the mirror, not his own, not human, a twisted, grinning figure stood right behind him, and then, everything went black. A face in the mirror, not his own, not human, a twisted, grinning figure stood right behind him, and then, everything went black. The next morning, Jake's parents found him asleep in the hallway. The house was exactly as they had left it. No broken doors, no scratches, no sign of anything wrong. Just one thing was missing, Jake's memory of the night before, whispered ending, but deep down, he knew, something had been in the house with him, watching, waiting, and one day, it would come back. Story number 3, it started with a noise, a soft, scratching sound. 15-year-old Daniel was home alone for the weekend. His parents had left for a trip, and he had the entire house to himself. At first, he enjoyed it, playing games late, watching horror movies, but by the second night, something felt wrong. It was past midnight. The house was silent except for the sound of rain tapping against the windows. Then, scratch. Scratch. Scratch, a slow, deliberate sound coming from inside the vents. Daniel sat up in bed, staring at the air vent near the ceiling. Maybe a rat? A bird stuck inside. The scratching stopped. The house was quiet again, so he shrugged it off and tried to sleep. But then, a whisper. Daniel. His blood turned to ice. He knew he hadn't imagined it. He grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it toward the vent. Nothing. Just dust and darkness. Then, the vent cover slid open, not fast, not loud, slowly, like something was crawling out. Daniel froze. His breath hitched in his throat as he stared at the gaping hole in the ceiling. The darkness inside it was too deep, too empty. Then, fingers, long, thin, pale fingers. They gripped the edge of the vent, pulling something forward. Daniel wanted to scream, wanted to run, but he couldn't move. Then, a face, sunken eyes, skin stretched too tightly over sharp bones, and its mouth, too wide, grinning. It knew he saw it. Daniel bolted out of his room, down the hall. He ran to the front door, fumbling with the lock. Then, a thump from the ceiling. It was chasing him, crawling through the vents. He could hear it, skittering like an insect, moving faster than it should. He yanked the door open and ran into the street, barefoot and shaking. And then, silence. Nothing followed him. No sound. No movement. Just the cold wind and the empty house behind him. When his parents came home the next day, Daniel told them everything. They didn't believe him. They checked the vents, empty, no sign of anything. But Daniel never slept in that room again, because sometimes, late at night, he still hears it, scratch. Scratch. Scratch.